The world of cinema has yet to recover from the news that Dianne Keaton, the woman who turned difference into an icon, has passed away forever. But amid the flowers, the lights, and millions of words of mourning, Dexter, the daughter Dianne once cherished and loved as if she were her own flesh and blood, has spoken out for the first time angrily, revealing hidden corners of her mother's life never before known. "My mother was a woman who loved deeply, but she was also someone who lived with a regret that never faded. It turns out her heart had endured more cracks than we ever imagined." Dexter shared that throughout her life, her mother longed for love, but chose solitude. She was always supportive of her children, always smiling brightly in public. But in the quiet of her room, there was often only a woman gazing back into the past, where old letters, yellowed photographs, and unfinished love still lingered. She made a devastating accusation toward Hollywood. But in her final years, when illness tormented her, not a single person ever came to visit. "The whole world abandoned my mother as if she had already died." So how did the woman admired by the entire world truly live behind those endless smiles? Watch the video to find out. Dianne Keaton adopted her first child, Dexter Dean, in 1996, when she was already 50 and at the peak of her career. It was a decision that shocked Hollywood, as KEATON was famously independent, had never married, and often joked, "The longest relationship I've ever had is with my work." But after years of living amid glamour and complex roles, she realized that what was missing from her life wasn't romantic love, but the chance to love and care for someone wholeheartedly. When she brought Dexter home, Keaton once said in an interview, "I don't need to give birth to her to be her mother. I just need to love her." 4 years later, in 2001, Keaton expanded her family by adopting a baby boy, Duke. She called it the second gift of my life. At that time, Keaton was focusing on more mature roles, and having 2 small children at home forced her to completely change her lifestyle. Early mornings, bedtime stories, school drop-offs, all were brand new experiences for the woman who once said, "Being alone is enough to make me happy." But Keaton quickly realized that the joy of motherhood far exceeded any cinematic achievement she had ever known. Close friends of Keaton said that she was always a devoted, meticulous mother who fiercely protected her children's privacy. Despite being a world-class star, she never let the cameras touch the lives of Dexter and Duke. Keaton wanted them to grow up normally, to have their own childhood unburdened by their mother's fame. She taught her children that peace was more important than glory, that being kind is worth more than being famous. Both children grew up in love and freedom, something Keaton believed she could never find in her own youth. Dianne Keaton once shared in her memoir that motherhood was the truest role of her life. She needed no script, no spotlight, only the daily presence beside her 2 children. For years, Dianne Keaton shielded her 2 children from the glare of the public eye, giving Dexter and Duke a peaceful childhood. Far from the chaos of Hollywood, she never allowed their lives to be scrutinized, because she believed that love did not need to be proven in front of a camera. However, when Keaton passed away on the 11th, that wall of privacy finally cracked open. And it was Dexter, her 30-year-old daughter, who spoke out for the first time. In endless grief, she shared stories never before known about her famous mother, a woman gentle, strong, and devoted to motherhood until her very last breath. Dexter grew up surrounded by the love of a mother who rarely spoke about her feelings but expressed them through the smallest gestures. Keaton never tried to be the perfect mother, yet it was her authenticity and occasional clumsiness that made both Dexter and Duke feel unconditional love. Every morning she would make them milk, hand-pick their clothes for school, and every night she would ask, "What made you happy today?" It wasn't a grand question, but it showed that she always wanted them to learn to recognize joy even in the smallest things. After KEATON'S death, Dexter cried for days. She couldn't bring herself to read any of the articles written about her mother. She said that all those tributes, however sincere, were still just outside perspectives. No one but she and her brother knew how gentle their mother was on nights when she couldn't sleep, or how she silently sat beside them whenever life felt too heavy to speak about. To the world, Dianne Keaton was a legend. To Dexter, she was the only safe place, the one who taught her how to be herself. Even when the world demanded she be someone else. Many people once asked why Keaton chose to be a single mother in her 50s. Dexter recalled laughing at how her mother answered that question. "I didn't choose the timing. I chose love." And indeed, she loved her children in the simplest way, without conditions, without control. When Dexter decided to step away from the spotlight to live a private life, Keaton didn't object or try to dissuade her. She simply said, "If that's what gives you peace, I'll always be right behind you." However, every legend's life has a darker side. And Dexter discovered her mother's deepest secret in her study. There, where Dianne used to sit for hours with a cup of cold coffee and faint jazz music in the background among piles of old scripts. She found a leather-bound notebook tied with a silver ribbon. It was worn frayed at the corners, carrying a faint trace of perfume. She opened it, and her mother's world, a world of hidden pain and unspoken love, began to breathe again. The first page began with a short sentence. "I loved him with everything I had." Beneath it was a single name that appeared over and over again. Al Dexter read slowly, feeling as if she were stepping into another life. That of the woman who had taught her that independence was the most important thing. Each of Dianne's words trembled, full of restraint, not from a proud Hollywood icon, but from a woman who knew how to love and feared losing. "He made me feel like a 25-year-old girl forever," her mother wrote, recalling 1971 when they met on the set of The Godfather. Dianne was radiant, lively, and Pacino, the man with deep, silent eyes, entered her life like a cold wind that would never let her feel warm again. Dexter turned the next pages. Dianne wrote about the days they filmed in New York. When she laughed, he looked at her, and the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. They didn't need to talk much. "We just needed to be silent together," she wrote. In long passages filled with longing, Dianne described how Pacino made her laugh in tense moments. How they drove through Los Angeles at night with Sinatra's "Fly Me to the Moon" playing on the radio, her feet on the dashboard, hair tzaled in the wind. "He was the dream I could never wake from," she wrote. Then that love grew fragile as the glare of fame crept in. Dianne wrote about the times he disappeared for weeks without explanation. The calls he wouldn't answer. The nights she waited until morning with an untouched glass of wine. "I was afraid that if I called one more time, he would disappear for good. But then he would return smiling, as if he had never left. And she, fragile yet proud, forgave him again. I don't know why I always chose to stay. Maybe because I believed that if I stayed long enough, he would love me the way I loved him." Dexter reached the part about Rome, 1990. Dianne wrote, "We lived together in a villa overlooking the city, dining on the balcony, laughing until we cried. I thought destiny had finally softened. But then the writing slowed, the lines tilted. I asked him, marriage or goodbye? He said nothing, and that silence killed me softly like a knife." Dianne recounted that night, standing by the window watching the city lights flicker, knowing everything was over. The next day, Keaton left Rome and never went back. Never saw Pacino again. After closing the diary, Dexter remembered moments when her mother Dianne Keaton would sit in her plaid armchair, holding a cup of cold tea, eyes fixed on the screen playing The Godfather. Even after hundreds of viewings, she would still smile faintly whenever Michael Corleone appeared. A vague, tender, sorrowful smile. He was my husband on screen, and that was enough. Back then, Dexter was too young to understand the faraway look in her mother's eyes. Now she knew it was the gaze of a woman remembering the only man she had ever truly loved. On her mother's desk, amid old scripts and family photos, there was one item Diane always kept to herself, a small yellowed piece of paper framed in glass. As a child, Dexter once asked what it was, and Diane only smiled. Just a small memory, one no one remembers but me. Later, while sorting through her mother's belongings, Dexter discovered that it was a handwritten note from Al Pacino. "You're the one I loved most. Always will." The handwriting was hurried, slightly slanted, as if written in a fleeting moment. In one corner there was a coffee stain, a small trace of a past Diane had preserved with her whole heart. In her mother's wallet, beside a photo of Dexter and Duke as children, was another photograph. Pacino at 30 in a black suit, eyes turned slightly to the right. It wasn't a public photo, not from a film set, but a candid shot from an old party. Dexter once thought about throwing it away, thinking it meaningless. But then she stopped. She remembered her mother once saying, half-jokingly, "He never looked straight at the camera, but he made the whole world look at him." Perhaps that's why she kept the photo until her last day. Not out of nostalgia, but because it was the only way she could keep the piece of her heart that belonged to someone else. Every year on Pacino's birthday, Diane would disappear for a few hours. She never said where she went, only left a note on the fridge. A day for things long gone. When she returned, she was cheerful again, hugging her 2 children, telling movie stories, cooking dinner, singing Moon River in the kitchen. But her eyes, Dexter always noticed, carried a soft sadness, as if she had just come back from a place only she knew. Once in an interview, someone asked Diane which of all the men in her life she remembered most. She smiled, tilted her head, and answered in a voice as light as a blade. "Al, always." When the interviewer laughed and asked again, she only shrugged. There are people you don't need to meet again. They stay inside you forever. Dexter finally understood why her mother, the woman once admired by millions, chose to live alone to raise her and Duke without a man by her side. Diane had once loved completely with everything she had and had been left behind in silence. Perhaps that's why she spent the rest of her life giving that love to her 2 adopted children. A love without conditions, without demands, without fear. Mom loved us as if she were mending a crack in her own heart, Dexter thought. In her later years, Keaton spent more time at home. She loved gardening, cooking, and looking through old photo albums. Dexter often caught her smiling at photos from her graduation day or the day Duke first learned to ride a bike. She never forgot to text them every morning, sometimes just a few simple lines. "Have you had water yet?" Or, "It's a beautiful day. Don't forget to take a walk." Those little things have now become the biggest absences in her daughter's life. However, those final months were also Dexter's saddest time. She witnessed the woman who once shone on red carpets with a smile bright as sunlight, now reduced to a frail figure, hands trembling as she lifted her morning cup of tea. "Sweetheart, I'm just a little tired," she would say, as if that weariness were nothing. But Dexter saw something else in her mother's eyes. A pain carefully hidden, smoldering like a silent flame. Dianne Keaton had always been a woman who never complained. She once said her life was a series of beautiful mistakes. But in those final years, her body began to betray her. The aftermath of her long battle with skin cancer left scars and weakened areas that had to be carefully covered each time she went outside. Some mornings, Dexter would see her mother sitting before the mirror, gently touching the area on her cheek that had been operated on, then smiling. That fragile smile still filled with the pride of someone who had endured pain without letting it consume her. But the body was only part of it. What was more cruel was the invisible illness Dianne had once spoken of, the one that gnawed at her from within. Bulimia, the eating disorder that had haunted her since age 25. In her diary, Keaton once confessed that there were times when she ate to fill the emptiness of a soul, afraid of being abandoned. It wasn't just a disease, but a battle against herself, against the fear of being seen judged or forgotten. After her mother's death, Dexter reread those diary pages and trembled at the shaky handwriting. I loved beauty, but beauty was what destroyed me. She never forgot the nights when her mother couldn't sleep. Dianne would sit by the window, staring into the small garden where the yellow light streamed through the glass like fragments of drifting memories. Sometimes Dexter would come out quietly and sit beside her, too afraid to speak. Her mother would simply smile softly and say she was listening to old roles echoing in her head. In truth, Dexter knew she was counting her sorrows. The roles that drained her strength, the moments she had to laugh while her heart was breaking, and the men she loved but could never keep. When her illness worsened, Dianne didn't want anyone to witness her weakness. She refused the nursing home, refused even the presence of a full-time nurse. She only wanted to stay in the sunlit house she had chosen herself. I want to leave this world in the place where I laughed, loved, and raised my children, she said. Dexter and her brother Duke took turns caring for her brewing tea, reading the paper, playing old jazz records she adored. Though frail, Dianne would hum along softly, her voice trembling, yet within every note lived a quiet freedom, as if she was bidding farewell to life. With the one thing she loved most, sincerity. In her final days, Dexter discovered a small stack of papers in her mother's bedside drawer. On them were notes titled, "Things I'm Grateful For." Breakfast with my children, sunsets over the rooftop, and the feeling of being loved even once is enough for a lifetime. At the bottom of the last page she had written, I have lived and I have loved. The rest, let the light keep for me. Reading that, Dexter broke down in tears. Still, Dexter remembered clearly. During her mother's final months, their Brentwood home was wrapped in a chilling silence. Dianne Keaton, once the woman who made Hollywood bow its head, was now left with only her doctor, her nurse, and her 2 children. Every day, Dexter watched her mother grow weaker, her body trembling from the pain of bone and joint disease, her memory fading like a burning reel of film. The white room gleamed with light, yet felt emptier than ever. No flowers were sent, no colleagues visited, not even a single word of concern from those who once called her a legend. What pained Dexter most was not the world's silence, but the absence of one person, Al Pacino. The name that had appeared in every story, the reason her mother smiled whenever she recalled the past. But in those final months, there was no phone call, no message, no sign that he remembered the woman who had once loved him with her entire being. My mother never resented him, Dexter said in a later interview, but his silence that I resented for her. And finally, at dawn on October 11th, 2025, the California sun rose gently, spilling golden light through the wide windows of her favorite room. On the desk, her teacup was still warm, her glasses resting on an open journal. She had been writing about love, as she always did. Dexter was the first to notice the stillness. Her mother was resting in her armchair, eyes closed, as if lost in thought. Dianne was gone, no sound, only a final breath dissolving into eternity. Dexter called for Duke, her voice trembling. The house, once filled with her mother's calm strength, suddenly felt hollow. Even the walls seemed to mourn the loss. The family released a short statement. Dianne Keaton passed away peacefully at her home, surrounded by light love and the world she built with her own hands. In the hours that followed, Dexter and Duke sat in the garden she once tended, speaking about her daily rituals, her morning tea, her long walks, her endless notebooks filled with thoughts never shared. They decided there would be no grand ceremony, no cameras, only candles, soft music, and words beneath the tree she had planted. That evening, the house glowed from within, golden light flickering through the windows like the warmth that had followed her all her life. News of Dianne's passing spread quickly. People confirmed that the Oscar-winning actress and Hollywood icon had died at the age of 79. Her face filled every screen headlines, mourning a soul so gentle and true. On social media, fans flooded their timelines with black and white photos, turtlenecks, laughter, and eyes that spoke louder than words. Outside her Brentwood home, a small crowd gathered, bringing flowers, candles, and neatly folded white turtlenecks. A handwritten sign read, "You made us brave enough to be ourselves." Hollywood's greatest names wept. Al Pacino, her once great love, released a simple statement. "She was the quiet mirror of my heart." Meryl Streep, Steve Martin, Woody Allen, B. Midler, and Leonardo DiCaprio all shared memories of her wit, her intelligence, her kindness, and her fearless authenticity. That night, the Academy released a tribute reel. Dianne's smile lit up the screen once more, from Los Angeles to Rome. Annie Hall reads Marvin's Room. Something's got to give. Every scene, every moment of love and loneliness intertwined, reminding the world that Dianne Keaton was not just a star, but a symbol of strength, resilience, and quiet, enduring love. Over the soft hum of piano music, Dianne's own voice played tender yet powerful. Love is the greatest risk of all. In theaters across the world, even strangers wept. It wasn't just grief, it was recognition, as if a generation was saying goodbye to its reflection. In cafes, people spoke her name as they would a dear friend. Elderly couples held hands in silence. Women of all ages left tributes. She made us feel seen, made us believe we could be ourselves. And that feeling echoed like a shared memory torn from time, a warmth that would never return. Now, with everything left only in memory, Dexter wanted to speak one final time about her mother. Not the talented actress, not the Hollywood legend, but the woman who chose to love her without any bond of blood. Keaton didn't just give her a home. She taught her that true love needs no conditions, no recognition. It only needs to live and be given. In her final tribute, Dexter wrote, "My mother once said that if she could choose again, she would still adopt me and Duke. I just wish I could tell her that if I could choose again, I would still choose to be her daughter, even for just one more day." For nearly half a century, Dianne Keaton was the conscience of Hollywood. The woman who laughed through pain, who wore humor and grace, like armor, turning imperfection into beauty. Her passing was not just the loss of a star, but the end of an era when sincerity still mattered. To understand who Dianne Keaton was, one must look into the silence that shaped her. Born in 1946 in Los Angeles, the center of dreams and illusions, Dianne grew up in a world where smiles were masks and emotions were buried beneath perfect dinners. Her father, Jack Hall, believed discipline was love. Her mother, Dorothy Dianne Keaton Hall, a former Miss Los Angeles, 1955, was radiant but quickly swallowed by the roles of wife and mother. In that seemingly happy home, Diane learned early to read between silences, to understand that appearances could hide an entire life in pieces. Watching her mother's dreams fade, Diane vowed never to share the same fate. While other girls dreamed of white fences and cozy homes, she dreamed of the stage, a place where emotions could live freely. People called her strange, unpredictable. But within that difference, Diane found her identity. In 1966, at 20, she left Los Angeles for New York and escaped from conformity and from her family's surname, Hall. She reclaimed her mother's maiden name, Keaton, a tribute and an act of rebellion. Manhattan greeted her with knife-sharp cold and an endless gray sky. Diane rented a small, crumbling apartment with peeling walls and a broken heater, sleeping in an old coat every night. The city was not for the faint of heart. Mornings spent in audition lines, afternoons, waiting tables nights, singing in smoky bars. Sometimes she survived on tea and half a slice of bread. Sometimes she pawned her shoes to pay rent. But amid the harshness, Diane kept writing, believing there was something within her worth hearing. Amid the city's chaos, Diane found salvation in the theater, where for the first time she was truly seen and trusted. She realized acting wasn't just a profession. It was a way to exist. Each role reclaimed a piece of the life that silence had stolen from her. New York wasn't easy, but it was there that Dianne Keaton was forged. Strong, eccentric, bold, and radiant in her painful honesty. And from that cold little room, a cinematic legend began. Born from solitude, rebellion, and an unshakable belief that difference is the only kind of salvation. Beneath the shadow of loneliness, a quiet fire was lit. Sacred, persistent, and eternal. In those bleak days of hunger, rejection, and cold, Dianne Keaton forged the will and artistry of a lifetime, transforming the haunted silence of her childhood into a powerful voice that inspired generations to live and speak their truths. In 1968, after 2 years of struggling to survive in New York, opportunity finally arrived. The Broadway musical Hair was searching for a face that felt raw, unpolished, real. Diane auditioned while barefoot, her heart pounding wildly. But the stage lights seemed to call her name. For the first time, she wasn't performing to be accepted. She was performing to live. That night under the spotlight, Diane felt 20 years of silence melt away, replaced by something alive, truthful, and fierce, beyond words. From that moment, the legend began. Every rejection taught her resilience. Every unpaid bill made her stronger. Long before the Oscars, before The Godfather, there was only a young girl lost in the snow of New York. Her breath turning to frost, pockets empty, but spirit unbroken. From that frozen place, the star named Dianne Keaton was born. Not from comfort, but from solitude and a relentless faith in art. Then in 1972, The Godfather was born, propelling Keaton from a promising actress to an icon. In the role of Kay Adams, she appeared as the light that contrasted with Michael Corleone's darkness. Gentle, yearning, yet ultimately crushed by power and deceit. The film not only brought her fame, but also gave Keaton something far more precious, a voice. In 1977, Annie Hall turned that voice into legend. The awkwardness, the clumsiness, the oversized suits, they weren't acting. They were Dianne herself. But when the stage lights shone brightest, the shadows also began to grow. The success that the world admired became an invisible cage. Every new script was a ruthless test. Was she still worthy? Dianne worked herself to exhaustion, memorizing lines, even after the crew had gone home, afraid even of rest. "I don't sleep," she once said. "I'm afraid to stop." The higher she climbed, the thinner the air became. Her laughter, once pure, now echoed like a hollow sound in a locked room. By the time Reds came in 1981, Keaton poured into it everything she had left: intellect, emotion, endurance. When filming ended, she sat in her car and cried, not out of sadness, but because she had nothing more to give. The film was a success. But Dianne felt empty, like a candle that had burned too brightly to keep existing. During the 1980s, her career slowed. The Little Drummer Girl was a heavy failure, and Hollywood turned its gaze to newer faces. Keaton quietly stepped away from the screen, not because of failure, but to rediscover truth. She rejected glamorous roles, wrote scripts, directed, and lived peacefully in her own silence. "Applause fades," she once said, "but the work, that's what saves you." For Dianne Keaton, glory was never the destination, but the struggle itself. Every sleepless night, every fear, every misunderstanding, all became the material that forged the legend bearing her name. The woman the world admired for her laughter built that laughter out of fear. Dianne Keaton, the symbol of freedom and individuality, paid for her glory with pieces of her soul. Though history will forever remember the Oscars, the timeless roles, and the dazzling red carpets, what truly defined her were the unseen hours. The 300 a.m. takes the tears behind closed doors. The courage to keep showing up when the world had already moved on. In the end, she realized the brightest light is also the loneliest one. But Dianne never resented that. She understood that solitude was what allowed her to see the truth of art, of humanity, and of herself. That was the ultimate victory. When the noise of fame faded, the silence that once haunted her became her place of peace. It's cruel that love can outlive the person who carries it. But for Dianne, love endured not in grand romances, but in every frame, every glance, every laugh she left behind. Dianne Keaton's fortune, estimated at over $100 million, was the product of persistence, labor, and solitude. She never inherited or depended on anyone. Everything was built by her own hands and vision. Her Brentwood estate, worth nearly $30 million, was a masterpiece she designed herself, filled with sunlight, ivy, and memories. Inside, reclaimed wood floors and walls lined with her own black and white photographs. Streets, towns, and old houses served as metaphors for her life. After Dianne's passing, Dexter and Duke, the two children she loved as if by blood, decided to preserve everything exactly as it was, turning the home into their mother's living legacy. More than an actress, Dianne Keaton was a spiritual architect of Hollywood. She restored numerous historic homes, including a Spanish Revival mansion in Beverly Hills, later sold to Madonna for $6.5 million. Her designs appeared in Architectural Digest and House Beautiful, each brick bearing her artistic touch. Her Sullivan Canyon home is now valued at nearly $29 million, a testament to her timeless aesthetic. Every object in her life carried a story. The 1960 Mercedes Pagoda, her longtime companion, still rests quietly in the Brentwood garage. Her turtlenecks, wide-legged trousers, and brimmed hats were folded neatly like works of art. Those close to her said Dianne had quietly prepared for her departure, graceful, deliberate, without tragedy. Her estate was divided between her two children and several charities devoted to preservation, mental health, and women's cancer research. Causes she had supported throughout her life. Her multi-million-dollar art collection included photographs of the California landscape paintings by Edward Ruscha and sculptures by young female artists. Many of these works were donated to the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, as a promise that the beauty and courage of women would never be forgotten. In an industry built on illusion, Dianne Keaton was the truth. A rebellion wrapped in a gentle smile. Emma Stone once said, "Dianne made women believe they could be both intelligent and strange. Anne Hathaway called her the compass of courage. Every young actress who chooses sincerity over perfection, difference over conformity, walks in Diane's footsteps. Her influence extends beyond the screen into fashion art and the very way women see themselves. Dianne Keaton turned imperfection into style and sincerity into an unforgettable strength. After Dianne Keaton passed away, Dexter, the daughter she adopted and loved as her own, spoke publicly for the first time. Her voice trembled but held pride, as if every word was a way to keep her mother alive a little longer. Dexter spoke of a great woman, not just on screen, but in simple meals, handwritten letters, and silent hugs. To her, Dianne was not a movie star, not a legend. She was a gentle, strong mother who always chose love over tragedy. And in the end, looking back, we can't help but ask, who was Dianne Keaton really? A Hollywood legend, a dreamer in a pragmatic world? Or simply a woman who wanted to be loved for who she was? Share your thoughts below. If you've ever been moved, inspired, or seen yourself in Dianne, leave a message of thanks for the woman who taught us that imperfection can be its own kind of beauty. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to discover more untold stories behind the world's cinematic legends.